Hey there and welcome back to another What If review, and today we'll be talking about the latest episode to drop, What If Thor Were an Only Child, which was honestly a breath of fresh air to this show. I'm not going to say that the show's become stale, because it hasn't, but there's definitely been a tendency to gravitate towards a much darker tone than's usual for the MCU. Usually the MCU trends towards quippy one-liners and enigmatic and cheery characters who find themselves in dramatic situations that ultimately get resolved with a bunch of jokes along the way. Now obviously there are exceptions to this rule, but for the most part the MCU's a largely lighthearted affair with elements of seriousness. But I feel like for the most part, this season of What If has been getting darker and darker with every episode, and has become a far more dramatic experience with only the occasional dose of humour added into the mix. But then this episode's taken it to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and instead of being a drama, went full comedy with basically no serious elements as Thor turns Earth into his personal party palace. And honestly, whilst it was completely stupid and ridiculous, I think this is by far my favourite episode simply because of how strange and unexpected it was. And now, with all that being said, let's jump into the review. Now obviously, as the title suggests, the divergence point of this timeline is that instead of stealing Loki as a child and raising him as his son after subjugating his people, Odin instead gives Loki back to his family and allows him to be raised as heir of Jotunheim. But this means that instead of having a treacherous, homicidal brother to grow up alongside and shape him into the man we know, Thor grows up as an only child who's given everything he ever wants and descends into a crazy party playboy lifestyle. Basically, he just becomes a trust fund kid, drinking, fighting, and just being a general nuisance with zero expectation of responsibility. And this is the Thor that we're introduced to as he arrives in Las Vegas alongside his Asgardian comrades, now that his father's in the Odin sleep and his mother's visiting her sister. So basically Thor's that rich high school kid who throws a rager when his parents are out of town, except instead of trashing his mansion estate house, he trashes one of the realms under their jurisdiction because it's the most backwater place he can find. So insignificant that not even Heimdall would bother to check if they're there, and thus, they'd get away with partying without getting a supreme scolding by Frigga. Of course, just like in the first Thor film, Thor's arrival on Earth does not go unnoticed by Jane Foster and her intern, and they arrive in Las Vegas to find it inundated with aliens looking to get involved in the party of the century, including the Skrulls, the Grandmaster, Yondu, Nebula, Korg, Drax, and even Howard the Duck. Basically, if you can think of it, they're there. And despite initially approaching Thor to interrogate him about destroying a planet in one of his epic party adventures, Thor quickly mesmerizes her with his charm, and she gets sucked into the party atmosphere. And the pair quickly find themselves on the dance floor of a nightclub and gambling in a casino, whilst Volstagg messes around with a water jetpack, Howard the Duck marries Darcy the intern, and then Thor and Jane get complimentary tattoos. You know, normal Vegas stuff. And honestly, this whole sequence felt like it was straight out of a fever dream scene that you'd see in something like The Hangover. I truly didn't expect this sequence of events coming into the episode, but honestly, I kind of think it fits with the new way that Thor's been portrayed since the release of Ragnarok. It just felt right. Jane then wakes up in a hotel room surrounded by the Asgardians, Rocket Raccoon, and various other aliens before she's accosted by S.H.I.E.L.D., who interrogate her in the hallway, revealing that Maria Hill's the acting director of S.H.I.E.L.D. because Korg accidentally KO'd Nick Fury during the night of debauchery. And of course, they need her help to neutralize the alien threat, specifically Thor. Jane learns that Thor spread the party atmosphere around the globe, prompting Hill to bring in the last resort, Captain Marvel. So again, this episode's just overall taking advantage of using any character possible wherever they can and giving the fans a taste of a theoretical battle between Captain Marvel and Thor. It's just fun for the sake of having fun. I can respect that. We then cut to Paris, where frost giant Loki arrives with his entourage, proclaiming that Thor's his brother from another mother before the pair make a wish on a shooting star. And honestly, all the interactions this episode were hilarious. It was like Ragnarok dialed up to 9. And at this point, it just feels like a skit interaction between Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth more than it does Loki and Thor at this point. It just feels so real. And then of course, the shooting star turns out to be an angry Captain Marvel coming to lay the smack down on Thor. She arrives and punches him in the face, only to be called a party pooper and launched all the way to Stonehenge. And of course, Stonehenge is then destroyed by Thor before the pair resume their battle. She then proceeds to kick his ass across America and the Pacific until they crash land and he cheats her out of a victory by putting his unmovable hammer on her chest, claiming she's in timeout. He then leaves to continue the party whilst all the aliens chant at her, calling her a party pooper. That's not how I expected this scene to go. And honestly, this whole fight scene was pretty funny, blending stupid slapstick cartoon level violence like getting punched across continents with more grounded and realistic superhero fighting. It was pretty fun. Anyway, after getting shamed, Captain Marvel has to reset, and after getting yelled at by Hill, goes to find Thor to lure him to Siberia and, in her poetic words, kaboom his ass. Whilst Jane attempts to get Heimdall's attention so she can get Frigga to save him. And all the while, we get a glorious montage of all the carnage being inflicted on Earth as a result of the party. And I think my personal highlight was Surtur, king of the fire giants, destroyer of Asgard, bringer of Ragnarok, trying to get lucky with the Statue of Liberty. I don't know what I expected coming into this episode, but it certainly was not that, and it gave me a good giggle. Over in Sydney, which as an Australian, if you ever see any content reference your country, it's a pretty exciting thing, we witnessed Thor about to use the Opera House as his own personal slide, before Captain Marvel arrives for their second rumble, taking him up into space before giving him the proverbial kaboom back to Earth, whilst Jane finds herself spirited away to Asgard by Heimdall, and S.H.I.E.L.D. arms the nuke to blow Thor to Kingdom Come, should Captain Marvel fail. Moving on, Jane manages to make contact with Frigga, who sends Thor the magical equivalent of an angry voicemail, telling him she knows he had a party and that she's coming to get him, which causes S.H.I.E.L.D. and Captain Marvel to stand down, and Thor to rush around the planet cleaning up his mess, like a teenager trying to complete all his chores 5 minutes before his mum gets home from work. And of course, as she arrives, he's teaching a class talking about the different cultures of Earth. And then it's all happy endings, and he makes friends with Captain Marvel, and he asks out Jane, and it all seems happy and like it'll work out for the best. Only for Ultron Vision and an army of killer robots to emerge from a portal, wielding all of the Infinity Stones. So, I guess this is the first follow-up episode for next time? Maybe this story's going to be continued in Season 2? Or maybe we just assume they all die here? I'm unsure, but I'm excited nonetheless. And side note, they're really doubling down on Evil Vision the past couple of episodes. I don't know how I feel about that. And that's basically the end of the episode. And this episode was just a full-on fever dream. The plot was ridiculous, the characters were stupid, and the interactions were corny. And these factors came together to form perfection. It was honestly so different from all the other episodes of this season that even if the plot wasn't as grand or exciting, I think this will be the episode that everybody looks back on fondly. Plus, Chris Hemsworth really brought it, just like Benedict did back in episode 4. Whether it's the arrogant rambling, his reaction noises, or just his general demeanour, he was perfect in this. Anyway though, those are just my thoughts, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Like it? Hate it? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know.